Hello guys, it's James Cook from JustDevelopers. Today we're going to be discussing Inline CSS and Internal CSS. So before we begin, we're going to be looking at the editor that we're going to be using. So if you want to download and install, which is from the previous video, Visual Studio Code, sorry. So once you've got that installed, there's two things that I would suggest to install that will help essentially things go a bit quicker. So what you can do is you can install extensions in Studio Code which give additional things you can do with the program. So I'm just going to head and show you two of the things that I would suggest installing to, as I say, speed up some of the things that you want to do. So once you have launched Visual Studio Code, if you go into View and Extensions, you'll see here you can search the extensions. So two of the extensions that I'm using is HTML Boilerplate and Preview on Web Server. So what this one does is essentially gives you a little shortcut which actually produces this. So rather than you sitting there and typing out everything from doc type to head to body and all that kind of stuff, all you need to do, it does explain this, but if you actually do HTML5, it actually gives you a little shortcut that you can go ahead and click, and that will output everything you need. So I'm just going to quickly delete that. Okay, so let's go back to our extensions here, and we've got preview on web server. So essentially what this is to give you the option to view in a sidebar, and also sets up a local web server. So if we go back to my index.html, and I think it is, sorry, Control Shift P and Control Shift L. So Control Shift P gives you the preview. So if, for example, I was to type hello guys and save that, it will instantly update on my panel. The only downside to this panel here though is if you're doing responsive web design, it's going to be a little bit tricky because you're not going to get the full size screen. So what you can do is if you do Control Shift L, and it's got on my other screen, if you just bring that over, as you can see, it's giving me my web browser again. If I go ahead and remove and Control S that, as you can see, it's instantly updated. I don't need to refresh the page. So that's what I would, these are the two plugins that I'd suggest. Okay, so let's get down to the work we need to do. So here is our page. So this is all our HTML. I presume you guys have taken the JustDevelopers HTML course to give you a bit of understanding on HTML and how it works. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is Inline CSS. So what is our Inline CSS? So CSS is a cascading style sheet which essentially allows you to give the website a better look and a better feel, basically make it look pretty. So what an Inline Style CSS is essentially within the tag, if you do style equals and then two quotes. So for example, we want to make this red. So we begin with, don't forget again, this is American spelling, so we have to do COLOR and then say red and then that. So we've got the name of the property that we're going to use, and then we've got a colon and then the color red. Ignore this part, this is actually just part of Visual Studio where it's going to give you some colors you can actually choose from. And then we've got the semicolon, and again once we save this, you can see our browser here, our inline browser is actually automatically updated. And if for example we wanted to say change the text size, we go font -size 100 pixels, Save that. We now have a huge sentence. Okay, so we could go ahead and let's copy this. Okay, let's copy this a few times. So let's save that. So we've now got a long list of sentences, but as you can see, things are starting to get a little bit messy with having all these colors, fonts, etc. in the what we call inline. I mean, it's good if, for example, you've got a rather big application, and rather than going ahead and adding it to an internal CSS, whereby you can declare a class or an ID, that I'll get to later if you don't know what that means. But essentially, if you've got a big application that requires a lot of compiling, and you just want to make a little change in here, then that's kind of when you want to use it. But if you need to make large changes, that essentially that's gonna take a little bit less time using a class than it is to put in individually, and that's when you'd use that. So that is inline styling, where essentially you style based on a line per line basis. So internal, okay, so internal is we do this. Okay, so we include the tags style, and as you can see, Visual Studio has completed that for me. Okay, so to begin with our our internal, what we do is let's remove our style. Okay, there's probably a quicker way of doing this, but I haven't long started using Visual Studio Code. I used to use brackets or what's it called? Sublime text. So I used to know shortcuts. Okay, so how do we use our internal? Okay, so we can use the tag p. Okay, so if we use the tag p, what we're saying is we're essentially saying that we want to change every p in this document. So okay, so we want to change color to blue. Okay, let's save that. And there we go. All of those have changed because we're specifying the P tag. But the problem with that is if, for example, we didn't want this line to be blue, we want it to be red. So you could add your inline style. We could do that. And then of course it'll override it. But that's messy. We don't really want to do that. So well, again, let's remove that. Okay, so how do we specify, what we want to aim for? So I'm going to just go over this briefly, but I'll go into this in more detail later on. But we've got something called class. Okay, so what is class? So class is essentially you're giving this particular line here a name that we're going to reference inside our CSS. Okay, so once we've done that, so say we're going to call this red. Okay, again, this is briefly. There's a bit more to this. So to access that, what we need to do is we need to put a dot, red, open and closing bracket, color, red. Let's save that, and as you can see, that is now red. So with our internal CSS, there's a bit of an issue if we start continuing to use this style. If, for example, we've got lots of classes or we want to specify lots of different tags, we're going to end up with something like this, which again isn't very, oops, I've just copied an empty. Let's copy that. So we're going to end up with something like this. So if imagine this is all different kinds of class names or different tags. So that could be H2, H1, and so forth. So what happens is we end up with a massive, massive document. If we actually save that, open up this, as you can see, we've got this here. If we actually view the page source, so if we right click on the browser and right click view page source, as you can see, it's rather messy, to be perfectly honest. You've got lots and lots of unnecessary lines in when you just want to see the content of the HTML. So there is a way around this, and that is what we call external CSS. Now, that's going to be the next topic, but just before we finish here, I just want to reiterate that generally having internal and inline CSS is not good practice. It's good practice to put your CSS in an external file, which again I'm going to go over in the next lecture. But I wanted to put across that this is not good practice. Don't get me wrong, there is instances where this may be much more efficient or much more quickly to do in a production environment, or it's just way the software works and that you have to put it in an internal or an inline rather than putting it as an external. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna end that here because I've been talking for a little while now. So again, remember internal, you have your style tags and then all your CSS, and then you've got your inline where you put it on a line per line basis. So thank you for watching, and let's go on to external CSS.